This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where my guest is geologist, organic no-dig gardener and soil food web specialist Eddie Bailey. Eddie is passionate about soil health and growing healthy plants that are good for you and good for the planet. Want to know what the soil food web is? What inhabits the soil habitat? Why soil health impacts on plant health and ultimately our health? And what you can do to get the best out of your garden? Then listen on.
So the soil food web, it's the community of microorganisms that live in the soil, but not just in the soil. They live in every compartment of every plant and on the plant itself. If you could sort of turn on a little video that could, or some kind of screen that could show these microorganisms, you wouldn't see the plant, or you wouldn't see us. In fact, the same with humans. We're covered in these bacterial and fungal and protist support network. I mean, they're helping us to live. They keep us healthy. They keep us alive. So the soil food web microorganism I'm talking about, bacteria and fungi, are probably already well known about. Mycorrhizal fungi, people have, that's into the sort of mainstream science, if you like. But it includes the protozoans and the nematodes and the microarthropods. And I use the analogy, I call it the soil Serengeti, because in people's mind's eye, they get the Serengeti, they can see the wildebeest and the zebra eating the grass, and that's effectively the billions of bacteria eating the organic matter in the soil. But in the Serengeti, you've got the cheetahs and the leopards at the next level up that eat the wildebeest and the zebras. And then at the next level up, you've got the lions and crocodiles. And everybody is sort of living together in a lovely balance, and the ecosystem works. And if you've got all of those primary producers and various trophic levels, which just simply means who eats who up the food chain, then everything works as nature had intended and everything is healthy. Now, plants were effectively, in my opinion, looking at the latest gene research, plants were invented by microorganisms for whatever purpose. I think that they were looking to create a stable climate, a kind of homeostasis on our planet for the good of later organisms. And they've been doing that for 450 million years. We come along and suddenly large swathes of our growing space have become depleted in nutrients. Crops don't grow very well. They become prone to disease and insect attack. And yet you only have to look at a mature woodland next to a farmer's field. No sprays, no pesticides, no synthetic fertilizers, and they're producing an abundance of vegetative matter year after year after year. So that's telling you that something we're doing wrong. And what we've done with those synthetic fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides is we're actually killing the cheetahs and the lions in the soil food web. And so the whole system, the ecosystem, is breaking down, and therefore the plants are no longer being supported as nature had intended. So the cheetahs and the leopards, those are the protozoans in the soil food web. So they're the next level up from the bacteria, and they eat bacteria. The lions, as I see in my soil Serengeti, they are the nematodes and the crocodiles. And that's what's missing, because when you dig the ground, you destroy the fungi. It doesn't help the protozoans or the nematodes either. But you start to spray with various biocides and insecticides, well, the only thing that's left at the end of the day is bacteria. Now, we know that farmers have recognized that they need to put ammonium fertilizers on their land year after year. In many cases, in conventional farming, they have to dress their fields with ammonium twice, 3, even 4 times a year. The record I've come across is 7 times a year. And you have to ask the question, well, hang on, where were plants getting their ammonium from for the 450 million years until we came along? Well, when one organism eats another, they poop out ammonium. When fungi break down organic matter, they create ammonium. And it's that soil food web that has been producing the ammonium that we've now knocked out of the system. So what I'm trying to do is educate gardeners and growers and farmers to say, this is the basic science that I think it's actually quite easy to grasp the difficulty or the challenge or the great deal of fun, I have to say, is working with these microorganisms and putting them back.
So is it sprays and soil management that is causing the issue? It's just that when you said about the farmer's field next to the woodland, I thought, yes, we are doing the things that kind of disrupt the soil food web, but also we are trying to grow plants that wouldn't naturally occur there. Is there an element of we're putting plants in that just aren't suited to the habitat or just aren't part of the ecosystem naturally? Is that also an issue?
Absolutely. There are many things that we've done which the soil food web isn't a quick fix on. That's absolutely right. I'm working with Best Chatters at the moment, helping them to become more self-sustaining with peat-free composts. And their motto, as you know, is right plant, right place. And yes, we're trying to grow crops that really aren't suited to the ground conditions. If you look at heavy, wet clay soils versus sand and gravel, free-draining sand and gravel soils, the basic microbial organisms in those two different environments, well, they're slightly different. Yeah, absolutely. And I sort of teach that soil is a habitat. There's a key recognition. You don't expect a polar bear to live in the Serengeti. It just wouldn't survive. So yes, there's absolutely an element of us trying to grow things where nature hadn't really developed that land for. The plants that are there. Take gorse. Down at River Cottage, there's this very, very free draining acidic soil based on the rocks underneath, the geology underneath. And if you leave it to its own devices, the gorse comes in. Well, the gorse comes in because the microorganisms that support gorse are there in abundance, and therefore the gorse grows. But you try and grow gorse down the hill slope where it's a much more alkaline, potassium-rich, silty mudstone. Well, they don't go down the hillside. They stay in that environment because the microorganisms in the wetter, lower alkaline slopes, well, they're there designed to grow plants that like those conditions. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But taking that just a step further, look at the F1 varieties. We've produced seeds, carrots of a particular type, strawberries to enhance their red color. And every time we do something like this, we knock out certain attributes that the plants need to call for these microorganisms that work with them. So I'm quite big into heritage varieties that haven't been quite so affected by modern technology.
Can you explain a little bit about what you do and how you help people in their gardens? Because I think that will touch on what it is that we need to be doing in order to make sure that we're growing in the best way possible for plants and for us.
Right, yeah. So one of the things that occurred to me through various meetings that I'd had with a number of people was that there was no face-to-face opportunities to talk and learn. Everything was online. And I've learned a lot of my things online, and they're absolutely right. I've done lots of courses online, and yeah, there's questions you want to ask that occur to you in the moment, but of course you can't ask them because you're looking at a recording. And so one of the big things that motivated me was to set up Rhizophyllia was to do face-to-face. So what we do at Rhizophyllia is we have day-long educational workshops, face-to-face, relatively small groups, maximum of 8, possibly 10 at a time. There are 3 basic workshops if you go to our website. If you like, there's the theory science bit. We do a lot of hands-on doing the theory science bit. We go out into the kitchen garden and around the garden in general, looking at examples of good and bad soil food web situations. And that's looking at the soil as a habitat. And I think these workshops, this particular one, really does complement the RHS level 1s and 2s and 3s, because I wouldn't claim to be the best plants person in the world by any stretch of the imagination. So I think we actually complement those kind of training courses. If you then want to measure the microorganisms, you're starting to think about rehabilitating a damaged soil. Because in the first workshop, we invite people to bring their soil in or their compost in, and we put it under the microscope and say, well, there you go. let's compare this now to a healthy soil, and they see the difference. Usually they're a little bit surprised at how depleted their particular soils are biologically, even in home gardens, but especially on farmlands. Those that want to then go on and measure, if you like, in a sort of semi-professional way. So we get lots of farmers, and we've had quite a few customers from estates and RHS. We then do a microscopy workshop, a day-long microscopy that teaches people how to recognize these microorganisms and how to measure them. And so they can sort of measure their improvements. And then those that find that these microorganisms aren't at home, well, how do we get them back? Well, that's all about good biological composting. So we have a third workshop where we teach composting with the soil food web and the habitat in mind, and how to inoculate with biologically rich composts and extracts. And that's all face-to-face here in Wootton Bassett. We're just off the M4 motorway, so right in the middle of the country. So that was a bit of luck to move here 30 years ago and be well supported by the traffic network.
And also, you mentioned about inoculating the soil. I did actually interview somebody who's making a probiotic for soil. Is that the sort of thing that you're looking at as well?
That's right. Yeah. We've sort of just started bringing our own little product to the market because, again, from the various workshops that we've done and the customer feedback, there are quite a few people who haven't got access to be able to make good quality compost. So where do they get it from? And so, yes, we're starting to produce. We're calling it kombucha. You've got your normal kombucha, the probiotic kombucha. We've called ours, because it's made of compost, kombucha, komp-bucha. Yeah, the probiotic for your soil. It's a spin-off from Rhizophyllia composting workshops. It's called the Biocharged Compost Company. So yeah, we've just started. In fact, we had our very first, if you like, formal sale at a craft fair in Cumbria at a place called Greystoke Castle just on Sunday. And the feedback was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, looking forward to doing more of those. But I have to say, anybody doing these things, I'd encourage anybody to do these things, because I think we're sort of in a sort of pioneering awakening of soil health. It doesn't just help your plants and your own personal health, but I mean, it's so critical for planetary health. So yeah, the more people understand and get to grips with this, absolutely is going to be better for everybody.
I met you at the Beth Chatto Symposium, and you were really a proponent for growing food and growing your own food, and thinking about kind of how the soil food web affects the food that you grow in terms of crops that we eat. Does it have an effect on the nutrient levels? Have you looked into that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of the more sticky but enjoyable parts of the soil food web Rhizophylia gardening and growing workshop is that we do refractometer tests, handheld and digital, on various foodstuffs and foliar. And it's quite eye-opening just how low the nutrient density is of your conventional produce, whether it's strawberries, tomatoes, cucumber, celery. I mean, the results I get from celery and cucumber, what can you say? I mean, celery, there's fiber, but it's water. And I think actually it's fairly common knowledge that iceberg lettuces are the lowest of the low. They virtually have no nutrients in them at all. They've been so designed and so messed about with that there are no pathways biologically to make them nutrient dense. So they are just effectively leafy nitrates. It's just a real eye opener. And when I compare those to the crops that I grow, then, it's chalk and cheese. My favorite example is the sweet corn that we grow. Obviously, I can only demonstrate this, at the end of the season when they're all there looking bright and golden on the cobs. But the bricks values of your shop produce might vary. And I'll explain this a bit in a moment. They might vary from, say, 6 to 8. I think the highest measure I've had from a shop has been about 12, but my sweet corn are up at 18 and 20 plus bricks value. What that bricks value means, it's a measure of the nutrient density. That means the sugars, but also the vitamins, the enzymes, the amino acids that are in the juice, in the sap. And basically what the bricks value is, it's a measure of the degrees of refraction of light passing through that liquid. And it's all relative to pure water. So everyone knows that light bends when it goes into water. Well, the amount that the light bends when you, say, stir a little bit of sugar in, it's a more dense liquid, so the light bends a little bit more. So basically, it's however many degrees it bends more than natural water is your Brix value. So a sweet corn that measures 8 on the Brix scale is just simply telling you that light is bending by 8 degrees more. And over many, many years of experimentation and testing, there are tables that you can find on the internet. You can just Google, what are the average Brix values of plants? And it'll show you tables that show you low nutrient value, medium, high, and very high. And you can see where a certain vegetable fits into that picture. For sweet corn, something like 8 to 12 degrees is kind of average. 18 degrees is up in the good to very good category. I mean, I'm still wanting to get mine, over 24, 25. I'm on this journey as well. So there's still plenty more that I can be doing. But yeah, that's Brix values and nutrient density explained. And to see what's in our supermarket shelves from conventional agriculture is eye-opening. And it does make you wonder, with all this sort of increase in illnesses across the world, it makes you wonder, well, just how malnourished do we not realize we are as a society?
I remember interviewing someone a while back about the Brix values, and that was a few years back, and it's not really gained much traction since then. Is anybody suspicious of the science behind that, or is it just that it's not widely known yet?
I think it's not widely known. I think that's part of it. But I do think there's an element of science. Wow. And I think that's why our workshops work quite well, because it's a face-to-face. And it gives you the opportunity to really, in these small groups that we do, really help those that may be a little bit skeptical, or, it just helps them to sort of understand bit by bit how this science is working, and putting it into, simple analogies that people understand. One of the things that I've noticed a number of times from the feedback I get from my workshops is the customers, the clients, our guests, I like to see them as, they look at me a little bit quizzically, and I say to them, does that make sense? And they look at me and go, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does make sense. But I don't know why, because this is turning things that I've learned upside down. And I said, well, that sense that you're feeling, I said, I don't know. But is that some kind of ancestral knowledge that we've all got? You see a red berry and you go, oh, I'm not going to eat that. It's a red berry. Why? How do you know that? That's ancestral knowledge. There's certain things we do still. You see a wasp, black and yellow, and you back off from it. It doesn't matter if you've never seen a wasp in your life. If you're a child and you've never seen it, you back off from these kind of things. Well, I think that ancestral knowledge of what's right for us in terms of food stuff and taste and smell, I think we can sense that. So Brix values is just one way of measuring that and putting a number to it. But when you explain the science behind it, I think people get it. It's just that explanation that's needed, and it isn't really happening. Again, exactly why I set up Rhizophyllia, to try and make those connections with gardeners and growers.
If you could leave people who are listening with, one thing you could do off the back of listening to this, or one thing you could go and research, what advice would you give, or how would you inspire people?
I would say, we have to get back to the real basics of what's going on here. And that is, soil is a habitat, and these microorganisms, they practically invented plants, and they've been supporting and growing them ever since 450 million years. And look what they've produced, the wonderful coniferous forests, the rainforests, the prairies, angiosperms, beautiful flowers. I mean, they know what they're doing. We just need to simply get back to nature. If anything that our workshops do, it tries to simplify things and say, well, this is how it should be. Let's get back to nature. That sounds a fairly sort of bland statement, but when you understand the science, and that's what I give people, these toolboxes, so they can take that science to wherever they're living and make it happen where they are. So soil as a habitat, and let's understand what these microorganisms have done, and they do the same for our own health. Gut health now is pretty much accepted, I think. So soil as a habitat. These guys, they know what they're doing. Let's get them to do the work. Our job as gardeners should be to provide them with the habitat that allows them to do their job that they were invented and evolved to do.
Thank you very much to Eddie for sharing his knowledge and enthusiasm. And thanks to you as well for listening. If you like this interview, I recommend checking out episode 149 about the nutrient content of food, and episode 129 with Nigel Palmer, talking about naturally feeding your soil. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.